There are currently 6 head coach job openings, so in this video I want to talk about each of those job openings and who I personally would hire if I was the one making that decision. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Let's hop into it. Now real quick, before we get into the 6 openings, the Patriots already hired their head coach in Mike Vrabel, so some quick thoughts about that one. I think it's an excellent hire. He's a proven commodity who has had success with not so good teams for the Tennessee Titans. He's also somebody who I think could continue that Patriots culture. I think it's a really good hire. But we are going to begin with the Chicago Bears, one of the more interesting and honestly maybe more intriguing job openings of this head coaching cycle. The reason why it's enticing and interesting is because you already have a foundation of players that you're building around. You already got Caleb Williams, you already have DJ Moore, you already have Montez Sweat, you already got Rome Odunze, and so many other key pieces. The only issue that's really been holding this team back is, well, you got to develop your young quarterback and build around him, especially offensive line, but primarily coaching has been the biggest issue. Now for the Chicago Bears, while thinking about who I would personally hire as a head coach, I personally wanted to get somebody who has a level of experience while also being a successful head coach. So guys like Joe Brady, guys like Ben Johnson, guys like, even Brian Flores to some extent, I didn't really want to go after those guys that much because they haven't necessarily shown that they are proven commodities in the league as a head coach. So instead, because I think this Bears team needs a bit of a culture reset while also getting somebody who can instantly walk in there and have the resume and pedigree to be the Chicago Bears head coach, I wanted to get somebody who has had that level of experience. So when I was thinking about this, I came down to really 2 names, and I'm not sure if Bears fans are going to necessarily love these names, but I do think that they are the right names to get this Bears team going in the right direction, and those 2 names were Mike McCarthy and Pete Carroll. Now, Mike McCarthy has had success with the Dallas Cowboys. I know he gets a bad rap for, the Dallas Cowboys are choke artists in the playoffs, but I also do think that we have to respect the fact that he went 3 straight years of winning 12+ games. I'm not saying that that would be a perfect hire, but I do think that it would be a good hire to give them somebody who knows what he's doing. He knows how to run an operation. He knows how to run an NFL team, how to manage a clock, and how to put out a successful offense. But ultimately, the head coach that I would personally hire if I was the Bears would be Pete Carroll. Now, yes, he's a little bit older. Obviously, I think he'd still be the oldest head coach in the NFL. My mindset with this pick would be, I think Pete Carroll is a proven guy. He's won a Super Bowl, has been very successful, still a pretty innovative head coach. More than anything, people like him, guys like him, people want to play good for him. A good culture guy. I think he'd be a really nice fit for the Chicago Bears. The only downside of getting Pete Carroll is that he probably wouldn't be the long-term answer for him or for this position because, of course, he is older. You can have the guy for 5, maybe 6 years and then have an understudy kind of learn behind him. I think it'd make a lot of sense. Then we get to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the Dallas Cowboys are the hardest one to predict because they actually haven't interviewed anybody yet. That's because they quite literally waited till the last moment to fire Mike McCarthy, and they honestly kind of screwed Mike McCarthy over as well. For the Dallas Cowboys, I don't think that this is a very intriguing job at all, just because of Jerry Jones. I think roster-wise, the Cowboys have probably the best roster of any of these teams we're going to talk about in this video. They have guys like Dak, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Trevon Duran, so many really good players. But you're working with Jerry Jones, and if you want to be a guy like a Ben Johnson who wants to bring his own general manager to a team, Dallas Cowboys are just simply not an option for that because Jerry Jones is going to run the operations and he's going to pick out who he wants to get. So unfortunately for the Cowboys, guys like Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Pete Carroll in some ways don't really make a bunch of sense to the Dallas Cowboys because I don't think that they're going to want to work with, a guy like Jerry Jones. So when thinking about who I would personally pick for the Dallas Cowboys, I wanted to find somebody who, one, wasn't a yes man or somebody who has already worked with Jerry Jones in the past. So that's going to eliminate guys like Kellen Moore, Deion Sanders, who I don't think would be a yes man, but I don't think he's the right fit for the Cowboys. Even Jason Witten, who has been somehow, some way in conversations for the position. Ultimately, I want a guy who can help reset the culture for the Dallas Cowboys, be a strong offensive or defensive mind, and not be a yes man to everything that Jerry Jones is going to say. I want somebody who's actually going to challenge him while also building a really good roster. That led me to Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, realistically speaking, do I think that he will actually go to the Dallas Cowboys? No, I'd be extremely shocked if the Cowboys even came close to getting a deal done with him. That's simply because I don't think that he wants to work with Jerry Jones, which, to be honest with you, I don't really know if anybody wants to work with Jerry Jones right now. Ultimately, though, I view this as somebody who is a strong defensive mind, can help build a defensive culture for the Dallas Cowboys, while also pushing Jerry Jones to actually make acquisitions and get players who are going to help his team. He's a proven commodity who has been an excellent coordinator in the NFL for many, many years. I think he'd be an awesome fit for this Dallas Cowboys defense, and I do think the personnel would be attractive to a guy like Steve because he can work with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and those great defensive players the Dallas Cowboys have. Then we move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, kind of similar to the Chicago Bears. This one's a pretty enticing job. The only issue with it is that there are some question marks about what's going to happen with the general manager position, because we've heard a lot of just nonsense about that position. What I will say about this job is it's attractive enough because you have guys like Trevor Lawrence, you have guys like Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, and a bunch of really talented players. So this is a surprisingly attractive job, especially to a head coach who might want to bring in his own general manager because, well, we've heard from, I believe, the owner that he would move the GM or whoever to allow the new head coach to bring in his guy. So this, in my opinion, is the perfect spot for none other than Ben Johnson. I think this guy makes a lot of sense for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You have your franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. You have your franchise wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. I think defensively, there are some things to work with, but obviously some things also need improvement. The Jaguars own a very high top 10 pick, so a guy like Ben Johnson could go in there and instantly install his philosophy with his first draft. I think Ben Johnson would also be enticed by this position because we've heard that the owner isn't 100% locked in on who he has as the owner and as the guy who runs the operations. So a guy like Ben Johnson, if he realistically wanted the job, I'm sure that he could get his way to have the guy that he wants to help build this roster and construct it in the way that he wants it to be like. I think Ben Johnson would be a home run hit for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I just think of all the positions that are open, I think the Jaguars might be the most realistic option for Ben Johnson, maybe outside of the Chicago Bears, who I also think could be interested in Ben Johnson. I just don't think that they're going to allow him to bring in his own guy as the general manager or as the guy who runs the operation. Whereas for the Jaguars, they would probably be the team that would allow him to do so. This is a Jaguars team that, in my opinion, has some talent. It also has the assets. And I think if Ben Johnson comes in there, I think he could really help Trevor Lawrence in his career and kind of get this boat going in the right direction. I'll be quick. I know you guys want to watch the video, but I'll get right back to it. I just want to let you guys know that I made a brand new YouTube channel called Metro Stories. It is a YouTube channel that is simply focused on telling stories of NFL players and NFL teams. So if that does interest you, go ahead and check the description below, as well as the pinned comment where you'll find a link for that channel. But let's get back into the video. But then we have the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, the Las Vegas Raiders have done a couple interviews. They've already completed some, and I think that they've gotten a couple interesting names out there. The only interview that they have done so far is Ben Johnson, but they got guys like Aaron Glenn, Steve Spagnuolo, Robert Saleh, Todd Monken, and Pete Carroll. To be honest with you, I think all of those names are really interesting names. I actually kind of like the Robert Saleh one, to be honest with you, but he's not going to be the guy for this team. I think the Raiders need somebody who is going to push the ownership to make moves. I think they need somebody who can be a good culture reset guy while also being somebody who can run and be focused on one side of the football field. I don't think they need somebody who is going to try to run every little operation on this team. I think they need somebody who's going to focus on their lane while resetting the culture and help building a good team while pushing the ownership. And because I think the Raiders should be focused on building a dominant defense, I wanted to look for somebody who is a defensive-minded guy, which led me ultimately to Aaron Glenn. Now, Aaron Glenn, to me, is one of the best human beings of all the head coaches out there. I think he's a really good guy, has great character, knows how to build a culture, how to build a team that cares about one another. He also would install that Detroit Lions mindset of biting off kneecaps onto a team in Las Vegas that I think desperately could use that. He's also somebody who isn't going to be a pushover. He's going to push ownership and everyone around there to make moves to help build a good team. He's going to push them to get a quarterback. He's going to push them to address the corners, the safeties, everything that he might want to have, they're going to do so. And what I like about Aaron Glenn is I think we've already seen just this year that he can work with personnel that isn't particularly good right now, especially on the defense. I know some Raiders fans might be like, well, we just fired Antonio Pierce, who was a defensive mind. Why would we go after another defensive guy? I think Aaron Glenn is very different from Antonio Pierce. He would bring that energy and that swagger while also installing discipline and character and culture, which was something that I don't really know if Antonio Pierce really ever had the chance to really do. Ultimately, I think Aaron Glenn would be somebody who would also probably want some control over how the operations of the team go, which would be the only holdback for me, but I think the Raiders would be very smart to let Aaron Glenn run this team. Moving over to the New Orleans Saints, who have also completed a couple of interviews and also have a bunch more to go through, I think that this is a very non-attractive position, and I don't think a guy like an Aaron Glenn or Ben Johnson would realistically want to go to a team like the New Orleans Saints. And that's because you have assets in terms of draft capital, but this is going to be a 5 to potentially 6 year rebuild to rebuild this roster. It's going to take the deconstruction of this team by opening up cap space and getting rid of these massive contracts of probably some quality players to allow a head coach to actually have assets in the future to build a team. I think this is a position where you have to get a guy who's a little bit younger, who you're going to be willing to give time to and allow him to develop with your team. I don't think that you can go out there and get a guy like a Pete Carroll whose years are a little bit limited, or even a Mike McCarthy in some ways. I think you need to go after somebody who's young, has an innovative mind, and is going to pressure the front office to actually make decisions that are better for the long run of this team. For the Saints, they've always been a team that has sort of said, we are going to try to contend every single year, even if we're screwing ourselves over in the next 5 years. I think by getting somebody who's a little bit younger, they're going to have a bit more of a future thought process, so they're not going to try to screw the team over. And I also think that they should continue to try to seek out strong offensive minds, because I do think that that is kind of the weakness of this team. So with that said, a couple names that I did think of were guys like Kellen Moore, Ben Johnson, and Joe Brady, and of course Liam Cohen, but ultimately I went ahead and picked out Joe Brady. Now I'll say this, I think Liam Cohen might be the better candidate, but I actually think Liam Cohen might be the next head coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For Joe Brady, obviously we all know Joe Brady has some connections with Louisiana. Obviously he was a part of that really good 2019 LSU team, but beyond that, he has been a very successful offensive coordinator in the NFL. Just look at the Buffalo Bills this year. He's somebody who's extremely young. I believe that he would be the youngest head coach in the NFL if he was hired. I think he's somebody that the Saints can give a lot of time to help develop and grow, and allow him to have 5 to 6 years to actually rebuild and reconstruct this team. This is a Saints team that, again, has to figure things out, because this is a team that's going to take 5 to plus years to really realistically contend again if they want to actually fix their salary cap and dump a bunch of assets and figure this crap out. Because you got massive contracts like Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, so on and so forth that you're going to have to figure out, and you can't restructure more deals. I know that. So for the New Orleans Saints, by adding a guy like Joe Brady, you're thinking about your future. You're getting somebody who knows how to run an offense right now. I think Joe Brady could have success during the time that he's trying to figure out the salary cap and all this and that. I think Joe Brady would be a great hire. And then lastly, the New York Jets. Now, I think for the New York Jets, I wanted somebody who can help rebuild culture, kind of a theme of this video, install discipline, while also giving this team the defensive mind they should consistently have. This Jets team should be a defensive team. And I know that people might be like, well, we had that with Robert Saleh. Why would we fire Robert Saleh? I think focusing on the defense should be the priority of this. I just don't think that Robert Saleh was necessarily the right guy. And that's because I don't think Robert Saleh really gave this team the discipline or the culture that they really needed, even though he was a pretty good defensive mind. So with that said, I want somebody who is going to be a little bit more harsh, a little bit more detail oriented, a little bit more creative on the defensive mind, and that led me to Brian Flores. Now, I know that there have been some interesting things said about his time with the Miami Dolphins, and in some ways I think that's a bit concerning, but also in some other ways I think that he has a good mindset of running an operation with discipline and with order and stuff like that. And I think a team like the New York Jets could really use that. Now, the interesting thing would be, is he realistically going to work with the ownership that the New York Jets have? I don't know. But by adding Brian Flores, I think you're building a really good defensive team that already has a lot of really good pieces. The only thing for Brian Flores would be, who can he find to be his offensive coordinator, and then just let them run the offense. I think this would be an excellent hire because, again, you need your defensive guy who's also going to help build your culture, and I think Brian Flores would be the guy. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about my predictions and who I would personally hire? And if you agree or disagree, of course, let me know. And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.